the Conn Man with the Conn Man Sports Corner. I am proud and privileged to have the one, the only
Yeah.
Mike Jarvis. You know what I mean? And for those of you who do not know, let me take you back a little bit. Coach Mike Jarvis, 1978 to 1985, was the Cambridge Benjamin Latin High School coach. He then went on to coach at Boston University from 1985 to 1990. From 1990 to 1998, he then went to George Washington, where he became America Big East Coach of the Year. 1998, he went to St. John's from 1998 to 2003. And from 2008 to 2014, he coached at Florida Atlantic. And before we get into that, Coach, and let me tell you something. I want to welcome you. Coach Jarvis, how are you doing?
You know what? I am blessed. The good Lord woke me up this morning. He said, you know what? I'm going to give you another day here on earth. I'm going to put you on the Sports Network live, okay, with the Conn Man. And so I'm good. Thank you very, very much. I'm great, in fact.
Now, Coach, I'm going to keep it real with you. I think, at least I thought I was a basketball historian, but
Yes.
I did not know that you played from 1964 to 1968 at Northeastern as a guard. I had no idea. Can you tell us about that?
Well, to be honest with you, that's where I began my coaching career because I didn't play a whole lot. I sat a lot and practiced a lot. And when you're on the third team of a college team, it means you play a lot of defense. So I learned most of what I taught for all those years during those years of being on the green team, the defensive team. I had a great college coach by the name of Dick Dukeshire. And but that's when I decided I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to go back to my old high school in Cambridge, across the river. And as the good Lord would have it, he allowed me to get not only a teaching job and a coaching job at the high school. And, and then history was made when he sent me Patrick Ewing and Ramil Robinson and a whole lot of other great players to coach. And that's where it all began, in Cambridge, Mass, and then at Northeastern. And then, from there, it's just a whole lot of places.
All right, now, Coach, you coached from 1978 to 1985 at Cambridge Original Latin, and you had some of the outstanding teams ever in Massachusetts. Can you talk about your experience coaching Cambridge Original Latin?
Well, to be honest with you, we had probably the greatest high school basketball team and program that New England has ever seen. During the time that I coached Patrick, we were 77-1. We won 3 consecutive Division I state championships. We filled every arena to capacity, including the Boston Garden. Wherever we played, it was over. It was sold out, and we were the number 1 team in the country. As high school basketball was never ever like it before, and I don't think it'll ever see it again because the only once in a lifetime does a Patrick Ewing come along.
Now, Coach, and I know Patrick had some difficulties once he came to Cambridge and Latin. How did you handle the situation that he was going through, coming from where he came from into Cambridge Original Latin?
Well, to be honest with you, he never really had any difficulties in school. I mean, his biggest difficulty came from people who were resentful of where he chose to go to college. I mean, his family, his mom moved into Cambridge when he was in junior high school, and she worked at the Mass General Hospital and brought family members over one by one, and they all assimilated into Cambridge. We had a really great, strong West Indian community and population in Cambridge. So they felt very comfortable, attended the public high school where I coached them. And, so he to catch up with the rest of the kids, he was in some special achievement classes and then matriculated into the high school, did well. But it was a lot of work. I never missed a class. worked his butt off. And, his problems came from the outside world when he decided that he was going to go to Georgetown and, over one of the Boston schools, BC, BU. And a lot of people resented that. And, and basically that was probably the toughest time, the best of times for him, but also a tough time having to deal with, the stuff that people were trying to basically put upon him. And, if about Boston and the surrounding areas, Cambridge was very different. We were very multiracial, black, white, didn't make any difference. You lived in, it was more about whether you were poor or not. And most of us were. And we went to the schools were completely integrated. You went to the schools in your neighborhood. Whereas in Boston, schools were separate. Each little part of Boston had its own city hall. And there was a lot of racial tension in Boston. And even though Cambridge was not in Boston, we used to travel and play in a lot of the suburban towns. And a lot of the people who lived in those towns had originated in Boston. So there was a lot of racism that was going on. We never used the race card. It was always about, let's be the best that we can be. Let's be the best, most complete basketball team that we can be. Today in this world we live in, the minute anything happens, somebody's calling somebody a racist. And
right.
Sure that if I turn the clock back, that would have, a lot of people would have been crying that. But that really wasn't it. That shouldn't be it, to be honest with you. But hey, that's the way it is.
So, Coach, how was it like coaching the team you coach? Because you had some phenomenal players. I can attest to that because I played against most of them, so I know. How was it coaching those great players?
Well, it's always tough. It's great to coach them, but it's also very challenging because they are, some of them, like a Patrick Ewing, who, in high school, or Ramil Robinson, who went to Michigan and won a national championship. Those were my two famous and probably the two best high school players I coached. But at every level, whether it was at Boston U, GW, St. John's, FAU, you get great players. And the challenge is to get a great player to become an even greater player. And that takes a lot. It takes, first of all, a lot of experience. You've got to be a pretty good teacher to do that. And you got to get kids to buy into whatever system you're trying to incorporate. But if you get the right kids with the right character, you can do that. And we always tried to get kids that were more concerned about winning than they were about their stats, whether it was Patrick, at Cambridge, or whether it was, Ron Artest at St. John's, or Abuchi Thornton, guys that, Ashante Rogers at GW, guys that were more interested in winning and being part of a championship team than they were in, the accolades that they got or the stats that they put up.
Coach, I remember exactly what you're talking about. And it brings so much joy to me. And we're going to discuss some of them plays you were referring to. But let me ask you about Kyle Hobbs.
Yes, please.
About Kyle Hobbs? Yes.
Well, first, yes, Kyle Hobbs was a young man that he actually played his last year at Cambridge Ringe and Latin. His mom had moved to Florida. He was of age, and he was able to find a place to live in Cambridge. And so he went to my high school. He played for me his senior year. He wanted to have a chance to get a Division I scholarship, which he eventually got to the University of Connecticut.
Yes.
One of the classiest young men I've ever known. Polite, courteous, and yet a killer on the court. And a winner all the way. And he is, in fact, coaching. He's an associate head coach at Rutgers. And I'm sure that, he's had a lot to do with their success. And this year, them getting in the NCAA tournament. He was the head coach at George Washington for a few years. In fact, he almost had an undefeated college basketball team one year. And did a great job there. But I don't know what happened, but he eventually, ended up his coaching at GW and went back to Connecticut, where he was part of another national championship program. And then most recently, he's been at Rutgers. He is a guy that, when he gets his next head coaching Division I opportunity, he's going to do another great job, just like he did at GW.
Coach, I agree 100% with you. Yes. As you know, we have a little bit of connection. His brother played with me at Framingham State, so we have a little bit of connection. But then on, you went from 95 to 1990 at Boston University. How was your experience there?
Well, you know, like I said, I keep telling you, whenever I talk about anything good that's happened in my life, I have to give the credit to God Himself, because when I went to BU, they weren't having a lot of success. They had success a couple of coaches before when Rick Pitino was there, and in fact, I inherited some of Rick's players, and we ended up, recruiting a couple other really good players. And on my first team at BU, I had a kid by the name of Dredrick Irving, who
I think I've heard of him.
Yes, he's Kyrie Irving's dad. Dredrick was my leading scorer for a couple of years. We went to the NCAA tournament. In fact, his last game in college was an NCAA tournament against Duke in North Carolina. And he was a great college player. I think if he was playing today, he'd be in the NBA. He taught his son well. And, most of those tricks that Kyrie uses, his dad taught him, because his dad had a bag of tricks. The difference is, back then, coaches like myself, we probably didn't let players really execute some of the things that they wanted to, because they were a little bit too fancy for us. And just like when Dr. J was playing in college, dunking wasn't part of the college game. I mean, dunking was illegal. So a lot of people never really saw the true Julius Erving until he got to the pros. And Dredrick, thank goodness he passed on his tricks to his son, and his son now, and the way the game is played, he can go out in the court and be as much of a show off as he wants to be, as long as he's producing.
Yeah, Kyrie, he's turned out pretty well. He's turned out pretty well.
Not bad. I tell you, he does some stuff that just reminds me a lot of his dad.
Wow, that's great. That is awesome. Now, then you circulated from there, from 1990 to 1998. You went to George Washington University, where you became the Big East Coach of the Year.
Well, I tell you what, at GW, in fact, it was the Atlantic 10. And in fact, we were getting more teams into the Big Dance than the Big East was when we were at Atlantic. When I was Atlantic 10, we had John Chaney down at Temple. You had strong programs. I mean, up and down the line. Whether it be Rhode Island or St. Joe's. We were loaded. We had a lot of great programs, Xavier and so forth and so on. And I was fortunate when I went to GW. I had a great president and vice president, AD, and they allowed me to recruit not only nationally but internationally. In fact, one year I had 11 players from 9 different countries. We were the most international. It was crazy. We were probably the most international team that ever played in college basketball. Gonzaga now is probably the program that people think of when they think of international players, but we were ahead of Gonzaga in terms of international players. And however, my best player was the smallest player that I coached at GW, and that was Shante Rogers, all 5'3" of him. In fact, his last year at GW, he was the MVP in the Atlantic 10 over Lamar Odom. That's how good Shante was. And we won a lot of games, and went to the Sweet 16 in 1993. In fact, GW hadn't been to an NCAA tournament in 30 years. So we went to the Sweet 16 and almost upset the Michigan Fab Five. If we had done a little better job blocking out on some missed free throws that they took, we would have beat them, and would have been part of the biggest upset in college basketball NCAA history. But they beat us at the end, with Chris Webber and Jawan Howard and Jalen Rose and Jimmy Jackson and the Fab Five. And but
Yes.
that was incredible. That was also the first year that my son coached with me. My son and I were the first African American father-son coaching team in Division I basketball in
I
1993.
never knew that.
Yeah, well,
I
this is a
never
history
knew
lesson.
that.
That's right. We just left. Not too long ago, Black History Month. And, we made some history of basketball together, and we coached a long time together. In fact, when I coached my last game in 2014, he was sitting right next to me as my associate head coach. And so I'm really, that's the greatest trophy I ever earned in my life. When my son said, "You know, Dad, I want to coach with you," and then he sent his agent, who happened to be his mother, to work out the contract, and the family stayed intact, so it was great.
That is phenomenal. Now we're gonna head up on to 1998 to 2003, where you coached St. John's, and which is my favorite, the Big East. Talk to me about that, Coach.
Well, it doesn't get any bigger than that. And we played in the world's greatest arena. Madison Square Garden was our primary home court. We won a lot of games during those years. We cut down the net a few different times, once winning the Big East tournament championship. I think that was in 1999. We went to the Elite Eight. Unfortunately, we lost to Ohio State by 3 points and a chance to go to the Final Four in 1998. And, in fact, the following year, we went to the Sweet 16. We lost to Gonzaga, but it was out west, so they really had a home court advantage on us. And but we, it was a big game. We came close, but no cigar. And in fact, that year, Sports Illustrated followed us during what they called Hell Week, where we beat, in 1 week's time, we beat Syracuse, Connecticut, and Duke in 1 week.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Unbelievable. And so, anyhow, I'm very proud of what we accomplished. We cut down the nets after winning the NIT championship, beating Bobby Knight's team, the Texas Tech team in the semis, and then Georgetown in the finals. And that was a great experience. Yeah.
Coach, before I don't mean to interrupt you, you guys need to share this. This is incredible. I am so excited to hear this. This is incredible. Coach. I'm flabbergasted. That's what a great career at St. John's. Wow.
Yeah, but sometimes you and I both know great is not good enough. And, there were a couple of folks that weren't quite happy with things that, with what I was doing. And unfortunately, they made a change. And after the change was made, a team that I was no longer coaching got in some trouble on a trip to Pittsburgh. And they, some folks even tried to blame that on me. And I wasn't even coaching at the school. But all in all, I would say that, coaching at St. John's was a great experience, mainly because of the kids that I had. And we made some great friends that are still lifelong friends. So no regrets. And, if it wasn't for the fact that they let me go, I wouldn't have moved to Florida. And when I moved to Florida, probably the greatest thing that ever happened in my life was, and what I didn't realize was that the good Lord was recruiting me to Florida so he could get me on his team. And when I became officially a member of his team in April of 2005, and I basically, that was when I gave my life to him. And, so the greatest move I ever made was because of maybe one of the most devastating things that ever happened in my life. And I'm blessed.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Coach, we're going to get into that a little later. But something, as I talked about when I asked you, I invited you on my show about the connection. Now, one of your assistant coaches was Kevin Clark. Am I correct?
Oh, yeah. Yes, Kevin. Kevin was
okay. Kevin Clark played at Clark University out of Worcester.
That's right.
Yes, and we played. I was at Framingham State. We played against Clark University, and he put a whipping on it. He was one of the best players I've seen around Division III ever. And then I found out he's assistant coach with Coach Jarvis. And I'm like, wow, that is awesome. What an awesome
Well,
thing.
well, it's funny. I'll tell you a story about how life works. I was getting ready to complete my staff. I lost an assistant and I needed a replacement. And my sister Trudy calls me up and says, "Hey, I know a guy that you should talk to." And I says, "Who, Trudy?" She says, "Kevin Clark." She was really good friends with his wife, Robin. And I said, I'd be glad to talk to him. So I didn't really, I had no intention of hiring. I had really already decided on somebody I was going to hire. But he came in and we had a committee that was put together. And he did such an incredible job in the interview that I said, you know what? And then I did a little more homework, found out that not only could he recruit, but he was also a good teacher, especially of big men. So when he came to GW, I put him in charge. He was basically the big man's coach, and he was also shared in the recruiting. In fact, he set up he gave me the opportunity to recruit some great players out of Baltimore, one of the greatest basketball cities in America. And I was able to recruit Shante Rogers and Kwame Evans, and we had some good players coming from Baltimore. In fact, my last year at GW, I think 3 of my starters were from Baltimore. Patrick Dumbo was also a starter, and so Kevin really opened up those recruiting lines, and GW benefited tremendously from it. And then when I went to St. John's, Kevin came with me to St. John's as an assistant as well.
Oh, that's great. That brings back a lot of memories. Now, Coach, you then went to coach at Florida Atlantic for 6 seasons. Talk to us about that experience.
Well, when I had moved, my wife and I had moved to Florida. We did it mainly because we needed a change and we wanted to get away from the big city, but we didn't want to go to another country or the other side of the world. So we chose Florida because, we could travel back and forth. Plus my mom was born and raised in Barbados, so she loves the warm weather. So we came to Florida. And when I first came, I was getting ready to start what I thought was going to be a career in TV. So I went to work with ESPN and would fly up every week to Bristol, Connecticut. And so I worked in Bristol for a couple of years. And then I went to, I worked out of Charlotte. And then eventually, did some work with Fox. But so when I came to Florida, I didn't come here to coach. I came here to get away from everything and thinking that, like I said, I was going to a career of broadcasting. That didn't work quite the way I wanted to because I was assigned to the studio, and I really wanted to, and eventually got to work on the sideline as a commentator. And the last couple of years, I worked with Fox Sports, and I really enjoyed that. That was probably the closest thing to coaching because I could watch the game and coach and broadcast the game through the lens of a coach. And yes. Some people thought I was pretty good, and I enjoyed it tremendously. But then the job at Florida Atlantic opened up, and it was right in the city that I was living in, Boca Raton. So I said, my wife said, listen, it's time for you to go back to work. Get out of the house. So I applied for the job, got it, and was there for 6 years, and my son rejoined me, and we worked together for the last 6 years of my coaching career.
That's phenomenal. Now, Coach, let's delve into some of the other things that you are involved with. You are also an author. Speak about that.
Well, I'm an author because I found great guys to write books with. Probably more of a co-author, but an author on Entitled. I've had 3 books that I've been blessed to be a part of. One being Skills for Life. It's a life skills book that's applicable to anybody from the 3rd grade to the 30th grade. I also was able to write a couple of books with a fellow by the name of Chad Bonham out of Oklahoma. Everybody Needs a Head Coach, which was a book that had 23 stories that basically tie into different facets of life. And then the last book I wrote was the seven C's of leadership, which then led into my being able to actually teach as a adjunct professor at South Florida Bible College using my book, The Seven C's of Leadership. So I teach a leadership course online at South Florida Bible College which is in Deerfield Beach, Florida. So, once again, it's funny how, God works and how he opens up different doors of opportunity for you.
Now, Coach, if someone who's watching this, how could they get in touch with what you do?
Well, they could go. I have a website which is coachmikejarvis.com. They could send me an email at coachmikejarvis@gmail.com. And I'd be glad to entertain, and if they had a question or if they wanted to get some books, or they wanted a speaker for a speaking engagement, they wanted somebody to come in and do a workshop. In fact, most recently I did a workshop with Delaware State Delaware State University for the athletic department on leadership and life skills. And in fact, we're getting ready to do some work with a program that's going to be, I think, a really big program called STARS, a youth enrichment program out of Ohio, where they basically run clinics and camps for boys and girls and do a half a day of sports and a half a day of academics and life skills. And they're going to use my book, Skills for Life, and I'm going to be able to participate in that program and help them grow that. So got a lot of great things going on.
Coach, that is phenomenal. Now, Coach, I'm the Conn man, so I'm going to hit you with some questions. So I want to see what you come up with.
Okay.
What do you think about college today, where some of the players do not even have to go to college? They can go into the G League and make $500,000.
Well, my thought on that was I always felt that college really, if you go to college, you should be going to get an education. And if you don't want to get an education, then if there's an opportunity to go and play professionally, whether it's in Europe or in the G League, then that's what you should do. And whatever you do, do it well. So I don't have any problem with that. My biggest problem is when a kid goes to college and he doesn't apply himself and try to get a real education, because I think he's really cheating himself. So, I'm almost to the point where I'd almost rather see kids, get whatever aid they get based on their need. If they're poor, they get a full ride. If they're coming from a wealthy family, then maybe they don't get a full scholarship. But at the same time, when they're in college, it's got to be about getting educated and getting a degree. And unfortunately, a lot of the colleges today don't educate. They indoctrinate. They put in young people's minds what they want them to repeat and to do. And so they indoctrinate as opposed to educate. College should be about education, teaching young people, how to think and how to come up with basically solutions to problems.
That's phenomenal. Coach, now when part of coaching is recruiting. So when you go out and you recruit, when you work recruiting, what do you
look for?
Hopefully student athletes.
Yeah, what I'll tell you what.
Opportunity or desire.
Yeah. Well, you know what you're looking for, first of all, you're looking for talent. You've got to get the right pieces to fit your puzzle. You got to get kids that bring something special to the table, whether it's an offensive skill or a defensive skill or a rebounding, whatever it is. You got to bring somebody to the table that can play. I mean, so you got to go after talented guys. You can't recruit bums because you're not going to be around. So you got to get kids with talent. And then once you identify the kids that got the talent, you got to get the kids that want to work, W-O-R-K, that want to be coached up, that are willing to be coached and pushed and cajoled and pushed some more to be the best that they can be. Kids that want to compete, that want to win, and they're not interested in just how many points or how many assists or how many rebounds they get, but how many wins do they get. So you want kids that want to win. who are willing to be coached, who know what it means to be a great listener and to follow instructions, and then be in a position where they can even offer suggestions. So attitude, becomes incredibly important. Like I said, you've got to have kids with the right attitude. And if you get kids of character, Red Auerbach told me once, he was one of my mentors, and he said to me, he said, Mike, he says, remember this. He says, when you recruit character, not characters. Recruit character, not characters. And if you can recruit character kids that have ability, that want to be coached, that know what it means to work hard and to be an intelligent person on and off the court, and give them and teach them and have them be acceptable and receptive to the different life skills that they need to have to be successful, then you got a chance of having a pretty good team and winning a lot of games, winning some championships along the way.
Coach, I wish you were my coach. I wish I had you as my coach. But
well,
Coach,
you might say it. Go ahead.
But
I'm
anyway,
sorry.
Coach, what I want to ask is, you got some of the top coaches who have no problem coaching the one and dones. Would you,
Right.
if you were coaching now, would you coach a one and done?
Well, what I would try to do is I would try to balance it so that I didn't have a team full of one and dones, because then every year you're starting all over again. So I wouldn't mind having one, maybe even two of the quote one-on-ones, because in order to win a national championship, you probably need to have three guys that are going to end up playing in the pros. That's what I was told once by an assistant coach, Aggie, Coach Williamson, who was with the Knicks as a scout. He said, Mike, if you're going to win a championship, you got to have at least three guys that are going to play in the NBA. And he was, if you look at most of the championship teams in college, they end up having at least three guys, maybe four, some even five that play in the pros. But but you can't have a team where every year it's a new team, because it takes guys a while to get used to you and get used to each other. So I'd want to have the balance. And in fact, one of the biggest mistakes I made at St. John's was one year we were in a situation where we had signed some really good kids, to come and play. And we were looking for a really good big guy. And the best big man in the country was a kid by the name of Darius Miles. And
yes.
So I told my assistants, I said, you know what, we're not going to recruit him because he's going to be a lottery pick. He's going to be in the NBA. And they convinced me, in fact, they convinced him to call me and say, hey, Coach, he asked me to recruit him. So the number one player in the country called me and said, would you recruit me? And I said, Darius, you're not going to play in college. You're going to be in the NBA. He said, well, you know what? I may not. Please recruit me. So I did what I shouldn't have done. I recruited him. We signed him to come to St. John's. And sure enough, he was the number 6 pick in the NBA draft. And what happened was he came, it looked great on paper, but I ended up with no player. And a lot of players passed on us because they heard he was coming. So you got to be careful, as to who you recruit. And, sometimes you got to say, no, I'm not going to recruit that guy. He's actually might even be too good for us.
Wow, that's deep. Wow. Now, Coach, what I want to do now, again, I want to bring you back. I want to bring you back a little bit.
Okay.
Towards your beginning. Because I have, as you probably well aware, I have a lot of Boston friends.
Oh, yeah, Boston.
They want to talk about, the legends and things of that nature. So, I consider myself a basketball historian, but I have to bow my head to you because you were there before me. So I want to know give me a little sense of who were the best players coming out of Boston when you were younger, and then as you be careful because you're going to get heat.
Well, you know what? There's so many. It's incredible. But I'll tell you who when I when I was being taught how to play with my buddies at the Cambridge Community Center, we had our instructor who ran the community center was a fellow by the name of Rins Jefferson. He had gone to Kentucky State, and he lived in Boston, lived in Roxbury, and he was coaching a young man who was a little chubby guy at the time, and he taught him how to play, and he was one of the greatest players that ever played in New England, Jimmy Walker. Jimmy Walker had an illustrious, in fact, he's Jalen Rose's dad. And Jimmy Walker was probably, I mean, other than Patrick Ewing, I mean, I tell you what, I don't think anybody was any better than Jimmy Walker. So you start with a Jimmy Walker.
Now, Coach.
Yes.
Coach, was Jimmy Walker from Boston?
Yes. Jimmy Walker was from Boston. He went to Providence College. He played at Providence.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, you got me.
Yeah. He was from Boston. I forget which high school he went to in Boston, but boy, we used to play against him in the Norfolk basketball summer league, and he was always ahead of his time. And he had the same guy that taught us how to play in Cambridge taught him how to play. So he had great fundamental skills, but boy, he was a special player with, like he was like a big Kyrie Irving. I mean, 6'4", but he had all the shake and bake. Oh man, was he good! So I started with him, and then we had. I mean, obviously at my own high school, I mean, I had Patrick, I had Kyle Hobbs, I had Ramil Robinson, who was maybe the number 1 or 2 player in the country when he was finishing up high school. So I didn't have to go very far to actually find 2 of the best players who ever played in Massachusetts. And then Boston always had, great players, a lot of guys that, for example, there was a fellow by the name of Paul Little, who went to Boston Lat. He played at the University of Penn. He was a great player. One of the first guys that played big-time college basketball was a fellow by the name of Ronnie Lee, who played at Lexington High School. He played for Rollie Massimino. Rollie Massimino was his high school coach. He went out to Oregon to play. Ronnie Lee. On and on. It's just so many great players.
Yes.
In and around the Boston area.
Coach, how about if I throw some names out and you tell me what you think?
Okay.
Al Mcclain.
Al Mcclain, sweet, smooth. I think that's one of his nicknames, Smooth. Al Mcclain, I coached him in the 1981, I think, shootout team. And I tell you, he was a great guard, could really shoot the ball. I mean, great shooter, great stroke. He went to, I believe Al went to, I think he went to University of New Hampshire. Yes.
Yeah.
And he went there with a fellow, I believe, Robin Dixon. Robin Dixon's sister, yes. Medina was one of the top female basketball players that ever played in New England. She was good enough. She could have started on a couple of my high school teams, my boys' teams. That's how good she was.
That's great. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of names, Coach, if you don't mind. I'm going to give you Rudy Williams.
Oh, probably Rudy Williams, also another Cambridge guy, about 6'7", long, lefty. As good as he was in basketball, and he went to Providence. He and Jerry Scott went to Providence together. And that was another the dip, great player. And but as good a basketball player as Rudy was, he might have even been a better baseball player. He pitched at the high school, and he was a lefty. By the time he delivered the ball, it was like you would have thought he was standing on home plate. He had a fastball. I mean, they were afraid to get up to the plate against him. And then he could hit the ball. I mean, he hit a home run out of every park we ever played in. I mean, he got a hold of a baseball, and he was driving balls 400 feet as a high school freshman. And he was also a great
Wow.
football player. Penn State actually recruited him in football. He was an end and a kicker. And he could have played he could have played professional, I think, in 3 different sports. That's how good an athlete he was. Probably the best athlete, one of the best athletes
So,
that
is
ever
there
played.
good.
I'm sorry, who?
Who was your favorite to coach, and who was the best you had to play against?
Oh, geez. Well, my favorite, I can't really pick. I mean, honestly, if I
Hey,
say
I'm the call
Patrick,
man.
I know. Well, you know what? I'd have to say, honestly, my favorite to coach would probably be Patrick. And I would say that because, I mean, you don't get much better than 77-1. And the only night we lost was the
No.
night he was sick one night. And he was all about the team, never cared about stats. And I mean, he showed up. He was the first guy to be in the gym, the last guy to leave the gym. He sat at the front all the time. He was right in the front, listening to every word, and he worked his butt off. So I'd say him, and probably little Shante Rogers, my 5'3" point guard at GW. Those would be, 2 of my all-time favorites, and I could go on and mention probably 10, 20 guys. But those would be, but once again, you asked me a question, so I got to give you an answer. Toughest guys to play against. Oh man, we played against some pretty good players. I mean, I remember Dwayne Mcclain.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, from Holy Name,
Yeah.
high school in Worcester. Had some
Yeah.
had some great battles against him. A fellow by the name of Gene Mewborn, who played at
Yes.
Lexington.
Yeah.
And then Brockton High School always had some great players. So I mean, it's just so many, and it was bad that we were as good as we were because I spent most of my time worrying about my team as opposed to worrying about who we would play against. And of course, when you got Patrick Ewing on your team, you feel pretty good about winning the game. So but a lot of great players.
Now I know something too. A lot of people probably don't know that Pat Ewing had a cousin named Billy Ewing.
Well, actually, to be honest with you, no, you're close. They played together. Billy Ewing and Patrick Ewing were on the same team in high school, our first undefeated high school team. Billy was our power forward. He was about 6'5" and built like LeBron. And he could jump out of the gym.
I know.
He was an exceptional player, but he was also a great student, and he went to Tufts. He and Charlie Neal, who was one of my guards, went to Tufts and in Medford, which was a great academic school, great school in Medford, Mass. And they played high school and college together. In fact, Billy passed away at a very young age. He had a blood disorder. So he died. And but boy, could he play! Him, and most people thought that they were either brothers or related, and they really weren't. They just happened to have the same last name, live in the same city.
Wow. Coach, I'm so honored and privileged to have you on my show. I know what do you want to say? What do you want to talk about? I've had 100 questions. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to get out there to the people?
Well, you know what? I guess what I'd like to know from you, why do you have the Conn Man's Sports Corner? What is it that you want people to get from your show?
Well, to be honest with you, Coach,
yes,
I started off as having a history of the game, as I claim I have. I'm a historian of the game, and I started off trying to make sure that the people who have paved the way for us and future generations do not be forgotten. And as I'm sure you don't know too much about me, but I am a true historian, and I've always stated on the shows that I've done is that a lot of things that take place off the court than on the court.
Yes.
And what I mean by but what I mean by that is the things of that happened with Oscar Robinson in the past.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Bill Russell. So to answer your question, my job, my mission is to do not ever let that be forgotten. So
You're right.
The reason why I'm doing the show is to try to keep their memory alive and what they've done, and to let people know what they sacrificed for all of us. And that's why I do.
Okay, let me ask you another question, if I may. What do
You can
you
ask me
think?
anything you want.
All right, what do you think about the times that we're living in right now, where things that we once used to think were, I guess, sacred, like sports, have now become part of the political games that are being played? I mean, do you think that players and teams, sports teams, should be being involved in what's going on politically as much as they are?
Well, I'll hit you high. You made it was Taki Grace. He was one of the Black Panther. So I go back to the civil rights a lot, and that's kind of why I do the show, what I do as well.
Okay.
But to answer your question, do I think I have to delve into the political impact? Then I think all for them. What do you think?
I didn't hear that what you just said. I lost you there.
Well, okay, Coach. What I stated was, if they do make a political statement or a political stand, if it can make an impact.
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes, like John used to say, talking loud and saying nothing. If you're going to make
That's
an
right.
impact, I think it's that much potential to do something. If you're just going to talk if you're going to talk the walk and not walk the walk, then I have a problem with it. But if you're going to make a stand that's going to make an impact, then I'm all for it.
I totally agree. And, I look at, and I think also, here's what I think. I think that if you're going to make a stand, whether it's, or you're going to make a kneel, I think you need to know why you're doing it. I think you need to know who's behind it, what they stand for, and not allow yourself to be used. For example, I look at the BLM, stance, and some people will be upset with me for saying this, but I think if people knew a lot more about the organization and their platform and how they're against, the nuclear family, I think they'd be much more, careful about promoting, sponsoring, financing certain organizations. Because a lot of these organizations like them, it's more about politics and social change, and about certain groups wanting to change America, that we've got to be really careful, what we stand for. But like you said, if we stand for something, we've got to be ready to try and make some changes, and make some positive changes, and come up with try to create a better situation, and not just complain about something. So like you said, if you're going to say something, do something, make a difference, put your money where your mouth is, go out there and get into the communities and really try to make a difference. I worked with a guy, when I was first out of college. I was coaching before I got the high school job. I coached at Harvard University with a guy that you certainly, I'm sure, saw play a lot. number 16, Satch Sanders. And Satch was a
Yes,
guy. Satch got out in the community, and he would go around and he would speak for free. He would do clinics, and he tried to make a difference. He had a program that he worked, a reading program. And, a lot of those Celtics back in the old days, I mean, they would get out in the community and do some real community work, as opposed to a lot of guys today that they talk a good game, but they don't do anything. And so, like you said, talk it, but then walk it, and if we did that, then guess what? It's all good.
Coach, I totally agree with you. Coach, right now, I don't do it to the level that you do it, but I am a community person, and I'm trying to make a difference in my community. And I feel by doing this show, I can help or maybe introduce people to a different food of thought. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that's my goal. That's my mission. And I applaud what you're doing and all that you've done. And let me tell you something, Coach. I have followed of the person that you have become and what you mean to the people of Boston and the people of Massachusetts and people all over. And again, I just want to thank you for coming on my show.
Well, I want to thank you for having me because I agree with you. And that's why I asked you about yourself. I figured you were about trying to really educate people, whether it's about sports or the history of sports or the history of a particular town, state, city, whatever. About, for example, if I had asked you, I quizzed you, you might be one of the few guys that could maybe answer this. Back a long time ago, Red Auerbach, he didn't care what color you were. If you could play, he played you. And in fact, he was the first professional coach to start 5 black players in a basketball game. Do you know who those 5 players were, by any chance?
Coach Jarvis, of course. Of course.
Okay,
that's too easy, Coach. I'm at a different level. But yes, I do. I know the history more than most people know. And that's kind of why I do what I do. Because I know the tribulations that Bill Russell went through. I know about the Celtics. I know all about Red Auerbach. I know all about it. Believe me, I know everything. That's kind of why I do what I do. Because I've sat with Red Auerbach and I've talked with him, and the great things that he did. Not only you said 5 black players to name the first black coach.
That's
right. I mean, we can go on and on. We can talk about it another time. But yeah, very full aware. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and my older brother took me to that game. I remember sitting in the Boston Garden and watching that happen, and I never forgot it. And then I became friends with Red through Satch. And in fact, when I went to GW, I found out that he was a GW grad, and he used to come to my practices, and we'd have Chinese food every other week. And great guy, and did a lot did so much for the game, particularly for black ball players. I mean, because a lot of players weren't getting opportunities before he started to give them the opportunity.
And Coach, if you remember, and I know you do, he did it at a time where there was civil unrest. He did it at a time that it wasn't popular to name 5 blacks.
Well, he did it at a time
when a black coach. I mean, he was way before his time. But I also coach that I remember Bill Russell and what he went through, and that stays in my mind constantly, and that's why I do what I do, Coach.
Yes, well, continue to do what you do, and by doing so, you will, I think, help to make it possible for another Bill Russell to do what he did, and maybe not have to go through quite what he went through. Because like you said, if people knew how much Bill Russell went through during his time playing ball, they would be amazed. They would be they probably wouldn't believe how he even did it. So I applaud you, your show, the way you go about doing it. And this was a pleasure of mine, trust me. Okay, and I hope that whoever listened to us today can go away saying, I'm glad I spent my time listening to those 2 old guys,
I hope so, Coach. I hope so. But Coach, I want to thank you for coming on the show. But what I intend to do to show you I'm a historian, I'm gonna ask you one trivia question, if I might, and then we got to go. I'm going to
Okay.
ask you, name the only player to win a high school championship, NCAA championship, an ABA championship, an NBA championship, and a gold medal.
Wow.
That tells you I'm a historian.
Yeah, you are. Now, ABA, high school, NCAA. Well, Julius didn't win any high school. I mean, didn't win in college in NCAA championship. I would have said Bill Russell, but you know who? And then I would have said KC, but KC didn't. He didn't play in the ABA. I'm trying to think who played in the
That's
ABA.
correct. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Coach, but I wanted you to know I am the historian.
Wow, ABA. That's the person I find hard to try and figure out is who could that be that played ABA. Alias. ABA. Wasn't Connie Hawkins. ABA. I don't know. You got me.
Coach, I wish we had more time because Coach, I wish we had more time because I can tell you a story that Nate Archibald had come in. It's a long story, but Nate Archibald came in with a player who played in the NBA. And I gave out because I used to do stuff on the microphone during high school games, trivia questions, and they couldn't even get the answer.
No.
Nate Archibald could not get the answer.
No, who the heck was it?
I'm going to give it. You know what? Because I have so much respect for you and I love that you came on my show, I'm going to tell you. His name was Tom Thacker.
Oh, Tom Thacker from Cincinnati.
There you go, boss. That's the one. Don't use my trivia question, though. Don't use it.
Oh, man. No, there aren't too many people in the world that would get that answer correct. I mean, because no, seriously, because most people wouldn't put Thacker in that. He was a great player.
Yes,
I remember watching him play for the national championship. That's when we had the little black and white TVs, and they hardly had any games on TV. College wasn't even on TV. Oh yeah, now every game in the world's on TV. But yes, wow. I'm going to remember that one. I'll be asking that question. So once again, high school, college, NBA, ABA,
and Olympic medal.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you.
Well, Coach, I want to again thank you so much for coming on my show. So I'm just beginning, but I want to thank you for coming on my show. I appreciate you, and may God bless you, and please stay blessed. And I'm going to have you on again if you will come on my show again.
I would love to. Maybe after the tournament's over, after I think Gonzaga is going to go undefeated and cut down the nets, but we'll see.
Oh,
we'll see. Okay.
All right. Well, Coach, again, thank you so much. Thank you, I-95 Sports Network, live, the Conn Sports Corner. Thank you all for tuning in. Y'all stay safe and stay blessed. Thank you so much.
See ya.